Imagine this. You're walking through your home in complete darkness. Your fingers trace familiar walls, counting doorways, navigating with perfect confidence, despite seeing nothing. Suddenly you realize something profound. You're not seeing your home. You're seeing a mental map built from memories, predictions, and assumptions. The actual physical space around you remains hidden in darkness, yet you move through it with certainty. This is the nature of your every thought. What if I told you that the thoughts you believe are yours, the opinions you defend, the preferences you claim, the values you uphold, are not truly yours at all? That beneath the surface of your conscious mind lies a vast, invisible architecture that shapes and directs your thinking without your awareness or consent. Consider how often you've felt the strange dissonance of knowing what you should do, yet finding yourself unable to do it, or believing one thing while acting in direct opposition to that belief. How many times have you asked yourself, why did I think that? Or where did that idea come from? The contradiction lies in assuming we author our thoughts when in reality we merely witness them. We experience the final product of thinking while remaining blind to the hidden processes that construct those thoughts. Like prisoners mistaking shadows on a cave wall for reality itself, we confuse the end result for the whole picture. What forces are truly shaping your deepest beliefs? What invisible hands are drawing the blueprints of your mind? And most disturbingly, if you aren't truly the architect of your thoughts, who or what is? The answer lies deeper than you might imagine, in the shadowy foundations upon which your entire mental world is built. These questions aren't merely philosophical abstractions, they strike at the very heart of human consciousness and identity. The hidden architecture of your thoughts has been explored by great minds throughout history, each uncovering different aspects of this profound mystery. Carl Jung would tell you that beneath your conscious awareness lies a vast collective unconscious, a reservoir of experiences and symbols shared by all humanity. Those sudden intuitions, those dream symbols that feel strangely familiar, those archetypes that resonate across cultures, all emerge from depths you cannot directly access. Jung observed how patients would produce symbols and patterns they had never consciously encountered, suggesting that something beyond individual experience shapes our mental landscape. Friedrich Nietzsche recognized this hidden architecture when he proclaimed, "Thoughts come when they will, not when I will." He understood that the conscious mind is not the commander, but often merely the observer of thoughts that arise from deeper processes. Your feeling of agency that you deliberately choose your thoughts is largely an illusion, a narrative created after the fact to maintain the comforting fiction of control. Arthur Schopenhauer went further, suggesting that what you experience as will or conscious intention is merely the visible surface of deeper unconscious drives. The thoughts you believe you've chosen are actually determined by forces outside your awareness, psychological, biological, and social undercurrents that shape your thinking while remaining invisible to introspection. Consider how your environment silently molds your thoughts. The language you speak determines what concepts are readily available to you. English speakers and Hopi speakers literally perceive time differently because of linguistic structures. Your culture implants assumptions so deep you never think to question them. The social groups you belong to invisibly constrain what thoughts feel permissible. Even the architecture around you, whether you're in a cathedral, a shopping mall, or a forest, subtly influences your thought patterns. Viktor Frankl, having endured the unimaginable suffering of concentration camps, discovered that even in the most extreme circumstances, humans retain one final freedom: to choose their attitude toward any given situation. Yet this choice exists within a psychological framework largely constructed without our conscious input. We don't choose the mental materials we work with, only how we arrange them. Your brain processes approximately 11 million bits of information per second. Yet your conscious mind can handle only about 50 bits per second. This means your conscious experience, the thoughts you're aware of, represents less than 0.0005% of what your brain is actually processing. The rest happens in darkness, in neural pathways forged by evolution, childhood experiences, cultural conditioning, and unconscious learning. The uncomfortable truth is that your consciousness is more like a passenger than a driver, experiencing the journey while largely unaware of the engine and navigation system guiding the vehicle. The thoughts you claim as yours have already been filtered, shaped, and assembled by processes you cannot directly observe. Your mind is a vast, complex ecosystem with consciousness merely the visible surface of a deep, mysterious ocean. This raises disturbing questions about identity and free will. If your thoughts arise from hidden architecture you didn't design, how free are your choices? If your most cherished beliefs were largely determined by forces outside your awareness, how firmly should you hold them? And more importantly, what consequences does this hidden architecture have on your life and society? The consequences of this hidden mental architecture extend far beyond philosophical speculation. They manifest in every aspect of your daily life, often in ways you fail to recognize. Consider how easily your mind falls prey to cognitive biases. Confirmation bias leads you to seek information that supports what you already believe while dismissing contradictory evidence. You don't consciously choose this narrowed perception. It happens automatically, narrowing your mental world without your awareness. The availability heuristic causes you to overestimate the likelihood of events that come easily to mind, which is why terrorism feels more threatening than heart disease, despite the latter killing far more people. These cognitive shortcuts aren't conscious choices, they're built into the architecture of your mind. Your emotions, which feel so personal and authentic, are similarly constructed beneath the surface of awareness. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio discovered that patients with damage to emotion-processing brain regions couldn't make even simple decisions. Without emotional guidance from the unconscious mind, the conscious mind becomes paralyzed by endless analytical loops. Your emotional reactions, which often arrive instantly and without deliberation, are actually complex evaluations performed by neural systems you have no direct access to. Look at how your sense of self is unconsciously maintained. Social psychologists have demonstrated that humans will go to extraordinary lengths to preserve their self-image, even when doing so requires distorting reality. When you blame external circumstances for your failures, but attribute your successes to personal qualities, you're not deliberately being hypocritical. Your mind is automatically protecting your self-concept through mechanisms you cannot see. This hidden architecture creates societal consequences of staggering proportion. Political polarization intensifies not primarily because of conscious reasoning, but because tribal identity shapes information processing before conscious thought begins. Studies show that people presented with the same statistical information interpret it differently, depending on whether it supports or challenges their political tribe. A distortion that happens automatically, not through deliberate dishonesty. Consumer capitalism exploits this hidden architecture expertly. Advertising doesn't convince you through rational argument. It bypasses conscious evaluation by creating associations between products and emotional states or identity markers. You don't decide to want things because of logical evaluation. Desire is manufactured in the unconscious mind and then rationalized after the fact. Even your most intimate relationships are shaped by patterns you didn't choose. Attachment styles formed in early childhood create templates for connection that operate beneath awareness, influencing whom you're attracted to and how you behave in relationships decades later. You might wonder why you keep choosing partners who trigger the same painful dynamics, never realizing that these choices stem from unconscious patterns seeking familiar emotional territories. The digital world has become particularly adept at manipulating this hidden architecture. Social media platforms exploit unconscious reward mechanisms, creating addictive feedback loops through intermittent reinforcement. The outrage you feel scrolling through your feed isn't accidental. It's engineered specifically to engage your attention through emotional triggers that bypass conscious evaluation. Perhaps most disturbing is how this hidden architecture makes you vulnerable to external manipulation. Propaganda doesn't succeed through convincing arguments. It works by repetition, emotional association, and identity reinforcement, all techniques that target unconscious processes. When exposed to misinformation, even after being told it's false, your mind often remembers the claim, but forgets the correction, a sleight of hand performed by your own memory systems. The gravity of these unseen consequences brings us to a crucial question. If your thoughts are shaped by architecture you didn't design and cannot directly perceive, how can you possibly break free from its constraints? The rebellion against your mind's hidden architecture begins with a counterintuitive realization. Awareness itself is the first act of liberation. Not awareness in the ordinary sense, but a radical meta-awareness, the capacity to observe your own thinking process as it unfolds. This isn't merely positive thinking or self-help platitude. It's a fundamental shift in perspective that great philosophical traditions have recognized for millennia. The Buddhist concept of mindfulness, the Stoic practice of the discipline of assent, and modern cognitive behavioral therapy all converge on this revolutionary insight. You cannot control the thoughts that arise in consciousness, but you can develop the capacity to witness them without automatically identifying with them. Consider the experience of having an unwanted thought. Most people either become the thought or fight against it, both responses that actually strengthen its hold. The radical alternative is to observe it with curiosity. How interesting that this thought arose. I wonder where it came from. This creates a crucial space between you and your thoughts, revealing that you are not your thinking, but the awareness in which thinking occurs. Neuroscience confirms this possibility through studies of meditation practitioners who demonstrate enhanced activity in brain regions associated with meta-awareness and reduced activity in the default mode network, the brain system that generates self-referential thinking. What was once esoteric wisdom is now measurable through fMRI scans. You can literally rewire your brain's relationship to thought. This shift in perspective is powerfully illustrated by Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl, who discovered that even in concentration camps, prisoners could maintain an inner freedom by choosing their attitude towards suffering. Frankl wasn't denying the brutal reality of his circumstances, but recognizing that between stimulus and response lies a space, and in that space resides our power to choose our reaction. Breaking free requires recognizing the social construction of your mental architecture. Anthropologists have documented how concepts considered obvious or natural in one culture are completely absent in others. When you realize that even your most basic assumptions about reality are culturally conditioned, you gain the power to question them. This doesn't mean rejecting everything, but examining beliefs consciously rather than inheriting them unconsciously. The work of cognitive scientist George Lakoff reveals how even abstract thinking is shaped by metaphors we absorb from our environment. By becoming aware of these metaphorical frameworks, you can begin to consciously choose which serve you and which limit you. If you've unconsciously structured your concept of argument as war, you might consciously shift to understanding argument as dance. Historical figures who transformed human thought: Copernicus challenging geocentrism, Darwin questioning special creation, Einstein reimagining space-time, all demonstrated this capacity to step outside the inherited mental architecture of their time. They didn't merely think different thoughts, they thought differently about thinking itself. Practical rebellion means developing specific practices that interrupt automatic patterns. Deliberately seeking out perspectives that challenge your worldview creates cognitive flexibility. Regular exposure to different cultures, philosophies, and viewpoints literally creates new neural pathways. Journaling with an emphasis on questioning assumptions rather than reinforcing them helps make unconscious patterns visible. Perhaps most powerful is cultivating genuine curiosity about your own mind. When you notice yourself having a strong emotional reaction, instead of being swept away by it, ask, what assumptions are being triggered here? What past experiences shaped this response? What would I see if I looked at this situation through entirely different eyes? This rebellion isn't about achieving perfect mental freedom, an impossible goal for creatures whose thinking will always be constrained by biology, history, and context. It's about expanding the space of possibilities, about recognizing that the architecture of your mind, though largely hidden, can be partially renovated through conscious attention. Yet this is merely the beginning. The deepest liberation comes from a final, more profound realization. The ultimate truth about the architecture of your thoughts reveals itself only when you've journeyed far enough to face a stunning paradox. The very self that seeks liberation from its hidden mental structures is itself a construction of those structures. This isn't merely another philosophical abstraction. It's a revelation that shatters the foundations of how you understand consciousness itself. The you that has been reading these words, nodding in agreement or shaking in disagreement, is not a fixed entity but a process and narrative being continuously written by the hidden systems we've been exploring. Your sense of being a consistent, continuous self is itself a story created moment by neural processes operating beneath awareness. Neuroscientist Michael Gazzaniga's split brain research demonstrates this vividly. When information is presented only to the right hemisphere of split brain patients, they still generate explanations for behaviors initiated by that hemisphere, even though the verbal left hemisphere had no access to the actual reasons. The explanatory module of the brain, which Gazzaniga calls the interpreter, creates coherent narratives to explain actions whose true causes remain hidden. This doesn't just happen in rare neurological conditions, it happens in your mind constantly. Consider this. Psychological studies consistently show that people can be influenced to make choices for reasons they're unaware of, yet when asked to explain their choices, they invent perfectly plausible but entirely false explanations. They aren't lying. They genuinely believe their confabulated reasons. Your conscious experience of making decisions and having preferences is often a post hoc rationalization, rather than an accurate account of what actually occurred in your mind. The Buddhist tradition recognized this centuries ago in the concept of anatta, or no self, the insight that what we experience as a solid, continuous self is actually an ongoing process without fixed essence. This isn't nihilism, it's liberation. When you realize that your self-concept is not a fixed entity but a fluid process, you gain the freedom to participate consciously in its creation, rather than being unconsciously defined by it. Philosopher David Hume expressed similar insights when he noted that introspection reveals only a bundle of perceptions in constant flux, not a stable entity we could call a self. Cognitive scientist Douglas Hofstadter suggests that what we call I is actually a strange loop, a self-referential system that feels solid but is actually in constant recreation through feedback processes. This realization collapses the very distinction we've been working with between the hidden architecture and the conscious mind that seeks to understand it. They are not two separate things, but aspects of a single integrated system. The hidden becomes the seen, and the seer is revealed as part of what is seen. What does this mean for you, practically speaking? It means recognizing that freedom doesn't come from some authentic self breaking free from artificial constraints. Rather, it comes from understanding that what you experience as self is neither entirely authentic nor entirely artificial. It's a creative process you can participate in with varying degrees of awareness. The power in this understanding is immense. When you no longer need to defend a fixed identity, you can respond to life with greater flexibility and wisdom. When you recognize that your opinions, preferences, and values are not permanent fixtures of a stable self, but elements in an evolving narrative, you hold them more lightly. This doesn't mean abandoning conviction, but grounding conviction in conscious choice rather than unconscious reaction. Paradoxically, by recognizing the constructed nature of self, you gain greater agency in its construction. By seeing how thoroughly your thoughts are shaped by hidden architecture, you become able to participate more consciously in renovating that architecture. The very awareness that reveals the limits of your freedom becomes the tool that expands those limits. This is not a destination, but a journey, one that spirals through cycles of increasing awareness. Each revelation of hidden structure becomes integrated into your understanding, which then allows you to perceive ever subtler layers of the architecture. The process never ends, because consciousness itself is this process the continuous discovery of its own conditions. The ultimate truth is that you are both the architecture and the architect, both the thought and the thinker, both the known and the knower. The hidden becomes visible not by being changed, but by being recognized as what it always was, the very substance of your awareness itself. In this recognition lies neither defeat nor triumph, but a quiet revolution in how you relate to every aspect of experience. Your thoughts will still arise from hidden depths. Your perceptions will still be shaped by unconscious processes. But your relationship to this reality transforms completely when you no longer stand apart from it as its victim or its master, but recognize yourself as its ongoing expression. The hidden architecture of your thoughts isn't something to escape. It's something to embrace with clear-eyed awareness, not as a prison limiting your freedom, but as the very material from which your freedom is continuously crafted.